So we've we've been sitting for about 45 minutes. So let's take a minute or so if you'd like to just stand up and stretch, and you can keep your video on or off, whatever you'd like, and then we'll get started. So I think most of us are either back or nearby, hopefully. So I think I'll start. So being 82 years old, I feel like I can speak to this from my own experiences, and they don't stop. I keep having more to remind me that I am aging. And I always like to contextualize what I talk about. And for me, the best way to contextualize it is to think about it in terms of the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths are that there is suffering. It's just a statement. And suffering should be understood. The second noble truth is that there's a cause of suffering and it should be abandoned, and the cause is attachment to desire, basically. And the third noble truth is there is the cessation of suffering. And maybe you experienced that a little bit when you were listening to silence. I did, but you may not have, or you may have. And that should be realized because it's sort of subtle. And so I think we don't recognize it often. So it's to be realized. And then there is the path leading to the end of suffering, which is the Eightfold Path, kind of grouped into wisdom, ethics, or living a life of integrity, and meditation. And so the Buddha always said that he taught suffering and the end of suffering. And so if one of his teaching is mindfulness of death, then there must be something about this leading to the end of suffering. And so I think there are two aspects of it. One is it's a deep teaching on impermanence. And so that's the wisdom part of the path. And also, I think it also points to sort of an urgency that we need to really practice with some urgency because this life won't go on forever. So there's limited time. So that's kind of the context of mindfulness of death. So if we pay attention to our experiences, and we did a little of that hopefully while we were meditating, it's certainly noteworthy that things are constantly arising and passing. And the arising seem to have a lot more potential to get our attention and for us to notice it and be aware of it. The passings require two things. They require staying with what's arisen, and that's sometimes hard to do. And it requires just being aware of the subtlety of the passing. and it oftentimes is very subtle. So death is the ultimate of passing away, ending. In Buddhism, there is a teaching of the 5 frequent recollections. And I'm just going to go through those because I think they all have something to teach us. They're stated, I like the rendition that the Abhayagiri monks use. In fact, I think a lot of the Ajahn Chah monks use the same verbiage. So the first one is, I am of the nature to age, have not gone beyond aging. And I like the fact that nature is part of the statement because Buddhism is aligned with nature. And so I am of the nature to die, to age, have not gone beyond aging. And so we need to bring our awareness to that we're constantly changing. It's very obvious when we take a long look and we see that we're certainly not the babies that we came into the world being. But we're aging day to day, minute to minute, second to second. And that aging is pretty apparent to me. I notice that my mind and my body are not as agile as they used to be. I used to be very agile physically. And a couple of years ago, I just started noticing that I felt clumsy at times and a little awkward. And that was new for me. And you know, we're supposed to bring mindfulness to our experience. And so we're supposed to, in this practice, bring awareness to those experiences, not deny them, push them away, pretend that they weren't there, cling to them and mourn the fact that they're losing, although mourning's okay too. But I've noticed that I bruise more easily with age. I used to have very durable skin. It's not anymore. I noticed that I don't sleep as well. And that was the reason why I said underslept or sleep deprived. The last several nights I've been waking up at about 3 and really not going back to sleep. Strange. So things change. I have to remind myself of all the other things that I'm experiencing. I feel like I am less resilient, both in my mind and my body. It's harder to recover from exercise. My body just doesn't endure as well with physical activity. And my mind's not as resilient. I can get confused a little more easily than I used to. Confusion was uncommon for me. Now it's more common. And it can be scary. And so I think when we feel scared, sometimes our first impulse is to turn away from it and not allow it in. But I think it's important to allow it in, to be present for what your experience really is. That's his mindfulness. Not to necessarily fixate on it. We don't want to do that. But we want to know what our experience is. Another change for me is hearing. I wear hearing aids, and I have for about the last 2 years. And it's a real disability. And it has a major impact on me. It has a major impact on me when I'm teaching in prison, because the acoustics there aren't necessarily great. And many of the men speak with a dialect, and that's always been hard for me, even before I was hard of hearing. And so that's really impacted my experience, because I want to be present. I want to hear everything that's said, and I want to be able to respond in a way that's supportive and acknowledges what's being said. I've also had lots of surgeries in the past many years. I've had a hip replacement. I've had both my eyes operated on for cataracts. I've had a fractured clavicle about 25 years ago that never healed and had a plate put in and that failed and I had that removed. I've had hernia repairs. So if it weren't for modern medicine, I might not even be here. So I am of the nature to age. I've not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I've not gone beyond sickness. Our culture's funny about sickness. Sometimes we blame the sick person for their illness. And I think it's important to realize that we are of the nature to sicken. And sickness would include, deteriorating joints, achy joints, of course, catching viruses and that sort of thing. The nature to sicken. And I am of the nature to die. I've not gone beyond dying. So that all things that, it is the natural way. All things that are born die. There's nothing that's born that doesn't die. Even the mountains are dying. They're being evaporated into the air. They're being eroded into changed forms in the ground. Everything is constantly in flux. And the fourth one is all that is mine, beloved, and pleasing will become otherwise, will become separated from me. This too. People we love, things we love, locations we love, houses we love, they're all going to go. Something to know, something to understand. It can bring up sadness, which is fine. Then you should know you're sad. No denial. There's no teaching in Buddhism that says, don't be with your present experience. So all the reactions we might have to these 4 so far teachings are to be acknowledged and to be mindful of and be accepting of. And if we have reactions to them, then know the reactions. I used to have a teacher that said, recycle the reactions in terms of mindfulness. Just recycle the reactions. Bring mindfulness to the reactions. And I think that's a really good teaching. So the fifth one is that I am the owner of my karma, my actions. Karma in Buddhism means actions, not the results of your action. In our colloquial terminology in this country, and probably many others, people use karma as the results of your action. But in Buddhism, it's our actions. So I am the owner of my karma, or my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related to my actions, abide supported by my actions. Whatever actions I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. I will inherit that. And in a certain way, that can be sort of disturbing because maybe our actions aren't always skillful. But particularly in these times of so much uncertainty, I find that a bit of a refuge. That we can really be aware of our actions. And we can bring the integrity part of our practice into informing our actions. And not basically non-harming. And that's what we can really kind of rest in, the results of our good actions. So there are some difficulties presented by our culture around mindfulness of death. We have a youth-oriented culture. We're all part of it. Nancy and Jill and I were talking about this before everybody came on. I'm part of it. I know I see my own tendencies to want to look youthful and act youthful, and uh, and that can bring suffering. That can definitely bring suffering. And we might even choose to have surgery to stay young looking. And that can be stressful. And when somebody does die, one of the ways of dealing with the dead body is to make it look alive. There's a whole mortuary business that's purpose is pretty much to clean up the body and make it look like it hasn't died. So we embalm them to keep them from decaying and smelling. And we clean up the skin and put makeup on them to look like they're not pasty and white. And it's hard to buck this, this trend of forever young. And it doesn't do good things to us. It's a potential cause of suffering. And if we've undertaken some of these things, it's something to look at. Just something to look at, whether it has ended our suffering or caused more suffering. And we can certainly identify with a lot of things. I noticed I had a self-reaction when I read the bio that was online, and it said Bruce has taught in prison for over 10 years. And I thought, over 10 years? I've taught for 23 years. And I had a reaction to that and a self-reaction around that. So I have to really watch out for those self-reactions. I had a teacher, the same teacher, and he talked about inevitably the sense of self arises, and inevitably the sense of self goes away, ceases. And so in our pursuit of non-suffering, it's really important to be aware of when the self arises. It's usually a very reactive state, and it's suffering. And so when we get too attached to trying to be young, that's a sense of self arising as well. So ultimately, I think what we need to do is we need to acknowledge the frequent recollections, nature to age, sicken, die. We're going to lose what's around us, and all we have is our actions to fall back on. And to bring awareness to it, and to allow ourselves to feel sad, to feel confused by it. It can be scary. I've at times, I must take a little side jig here. I think devices can really bring on confusion for old people. And I've seen it in myself. I'm pretty good with the devices, particularly the way that I use them for what they're useful for me. And yet sometimes I just get bogged down, and it can be, I can go to a place where I go, what? And I am really kind of lost in my own confusion. And that's a little scary. That's a little scary, but then you have to be acknowledged. You have to acknowledge you're being frightened. It's important to turn towards what your experience is. Just see if there's anything else I've missed here. I don't usually work off of notes, but being tired, I decided if I didn't, I'd probably forget half the things I want to say. So I guess the takeaway here for me would be to bring awareness to these recollections. That it is the natural way. It's the natural law that we'll age, we'll get sick, we'll die, we'll lose what's around us. And to employ the mindfulness practices that we're all working on. We're all trying to get more and more experience with and more utility with. And when we have reactions to these, to know it. And to acknowledge it. And to stay with it. All these reactions will arise and pass away just like we will. So I'll leave you with that.